Wildfires ravaging the west, hurricanes pounding the east, election that is distracting all of us everywhere, a pandemic pelting middle America, and all of that stuff is just here. There's a whole world of woe out there. Things we should be paying attention to. Let's talk about it with John Sitilides, geopolitical strategist at Trilogy Advisors. John is a diplomacy consultant to the Department of State. Glad to have you back, John. China is always looming large, and our relationship is fraught. While every nation is staggering to recover from the COVID, Chinese GDP is actually growing. And that's conspicuous. They attribute that to their early aggressive response to COVID. Is the USA disadvantaged accordingly?
Holland, first of all, it's good to be back with you and your audience. I'm so glad we're starting with this very important question, because this is in many ways about what the future of the global order will look like. And a lot of this is predicated on how China, and frankly, the Chinese Communist Party, was able to exploit its authoritarian system and its utterly ruthless approach to disrespecting the individual liberties of its citizens. So yes, it was able to lock down Wuhan right away when they first got a sense of just how easily the virus would transmit. And it came down to authorities even locking people into their apartments and keeping extreme lockdown measures for up to 7 weeks, if not longer, in certain parts of the area. So when you have an authoritarian system, Holland, yes, it helps you beat back the transmission of the virus. The problem for the world is that while this was happening in China, the Chinese government was encouraging the World Health Organization to continue to encourage airlines to fly Chinese citizens around the world, and essentially infecting societies around the world and giving us now a global pandemic that should have been avoided if the Chinese Communist Party either hadn't acted so incompetently in dealing with the virus, or in such a malign way as to potentially deliberately infect other economies so that it alone would not suffer such a grievous GDP drop in the second quarter. But I do want to note, Holland, also, that this is a very uneven recovery in China. And so the corporate elite and the major, larger state-owned enterprises are doing quite well in 3 coastal regions in Beijing and Shanghai and in Guangdong. But if you look at other parts of the country, especially in Upper Mongolia and Tibet and in Xinjiang, there's still very uneven recovery. Those parts of China are lagging behind. And the Chinese media reports what the Communist Party instructs it to. So we have no independent verification of any of the economic data coming out of China.
That's a great point. We only know what they let us know, and even that early footage of the COVID crackdown that leaked out did look like the opposite of a Trump rally. The crackdown was pretty brutal. John, there is continuing tension over disputed claims in the South China Sea. We keep seeing aerial footage of the runway on that island. Which countries are on whose sides in this dispute, and how is what's happening there going to impact us here at home?
Well, China is absolutely isolated on this, both in the region and almost around the world, except for countries such as Pakistan and Venezuela that are so utterly dependent economically on China. But China's neighbors, and we're talking here about Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Borneo, Taiwan, the Philippines, all of these countries have exclusive economic zone rights in the South China Sea so that they can potentially extract oil and natural gas, and maybe 10 to 15% of the world's fossil fuel reserves are found in the seabed of the South China Sea. You also have vast natural fisheries there, Holland, to be able to feed increasingly affluent societies with high-protein diets. But from a global trading perspective, this is maybe one of the most important waterways of the world, essentially a maritime superhighway, and about 1/3 of the world's commerce traverses the South China Sea every year, connecting markets in Asia, namely those of China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, through the South China Sea for energy from the Middle East and ultimately for consumer markets in Europe. And China's salami slice tactics over the last 15 years, first saying that they have some defensive concerns in the South China Sea, then promising President Obama there'd be no militarization of these artificial islands the Chinese have built, then militarizing those islands, and now firing missiles into the air. Well, we have very important consequences we're concerned with here, Holland, because this is 1.4 million square miles of international waterways and international airspace, and the Chinese are essentially claiming this as a sovereign Chinese lake. So it's very dangerous for the global trading system. It's very harmful to China's neighbors throughout East Asia and in the Southeast Asia region. But also, I think, in terms of an international precedent, if China is able to essentially subsume the South China Sea and make it sovereign Chinese territory, there's no stopping other countries that have the power to exercise regional military muscle to start claiming international waters and international airspace as their own, and then there's no global order.
You're right. It sets a precedent. We're speaking with geopolitical strategist John Sitilides, Trilogy Advisors. Dateline Mideast with a flourish that seemed to evoke the Carter-era group hug with Begin and Sadat. Trump is trumpeting two peace deals, which countries that weren't actually at war with each other have concluded, neither of which border Israel, whereupon Matt Brooks, who is executive director of a group called the Republican Jewish Coalition, pronounced Trump a peacemaker and a statesman, saying he has done something which successive administrations before him have been unable to do on a grand and historic level. And while former Obama senior strategist David Axelrod shrugs, even for older Jewish voters in Florida, I suspect the UAE and Bahrain were not foremost on their radar screen when it comes to Middle East peace. John, applause for peace, but beneath the symbolism, what is the substance of these deals?
The substance is very significant here, Holland. First of all, credit is due to Presidents Carter and to President Clinton for their respective deal-making, bringing Israel into diplomatic relations with Egypt and with Jordan, respectively. But what we have here is far deeper. And yes, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain are not technically at war today with Israel, but they have backed the Arab coalitions that attacked and invaded Israel in prior decades. And they have been part of these embargoes that have been very, very damaging to the Israeli economy over the decades as well. But I think on a substantive level, what you have here is not simply diplomatic relations, but a comprehensive normalization of relations beyond what Egypt and Jordan have enjoyed with Israel in the last several decades, so that these two countries intend to engage in significant economic trade and exchanges, investment in all three countries, that is, technology development, and even more importantly, Holland, military training and intelligence sharing as part of a regional network to help better contain Iranian regional aggression. And I think what you'll see here is these countries will be followed by other Arab countries such as Oman, Morocco, possibly Sudan, and eventually maybe in the next several years, depending on who succeeds the current king of Saudi Arabia. But if it's Mohammed bin Salman, you may see Saudi Arabia entering this coalition. And then you have this historic Israeli/Sunni Arab coalition that seeks to effectively contain and diminish Iranian destabilization in the Middle East and beyond. So it's quite substantive and very significant.
John, I only have 1 minute left, but I must ask you, with the death of Justice Ginsburg igniting a battle between hurry up and not so fast, and with this presidential election itself as it is, foreign affairs, are things accelerating? Quick, let's get this done while we have Trump, or is there a wait and see attitude as countries around the world are waiting to see what happens on November 3rd? Give me about a minute.
Sure. You know, I bet the world is watching with fascination and also maybe with some sense of alarm, given many of the questions about potential voter integrity on Election Day and whether or not we'll actually be able to declare the winner on Election night, which I'm confident we should be if we don't have any massive fraud of electioneering. But I think you'll see in different capitals different expectations. In Beijing, I'm certain they're hoping that Joe Biden will win because Trump has been so unpredictable and he's fought back Chinese aggression every step of the way, geopolitically, economically, and technologically. In Russia, I'm
Yep.
not sure that Vladimir Putin cares because I think either presidency will be a very problematic one for him. He might think that Joe Biden is part of a Democratic Party that is pathologically obsessed with Vladimir Putin in Russia. So Trump might still be better than Biden. Germany, I think, is hoping Joe Biden comes in so that they don't have to hear any more about this new pipeline with Russia and their very weak burden sharing in NATO. The United Kingdom certainly wants to maintain its relations with Donald Trump. And I think the Israelis and these new Arab countries that are in a peace deal with Israel certainly would prefer Donald Trump to Joe Biden, who has already stated if he becomes president, he's going to have the United States rejoin the Iran nuclear agreement. And that means Iran's going to get a nuclear weapon in just a few years.
Wow, fascinating analysis as always. John Sitilides, Trilogy Advisors, please come again.